The Comanche were once the masters of the Great Plains, and while they may have been defeated by the US in the 1870s, the Comanche Nation still exists and continues to live by many codes established hundreds of years ago. The Comanche remained nomadic, never settling until they were forced onto reservations by the US government. Mobility was power. It gave them the advantage over their enemies, the Apache, who ruled the southern plains between the 1720s and the 1750s. But the Apache were farmers with land to protect, while Comanche didn't have time for any gardening. They would simply swoop in, make mayhem, and ride off to fight another day. This smash-and-grab approach to warfare also worked against non-native enemies. The Comanche outfought Spanish colonial armies sent by Mexico City to handle them, and once Mexico earned its independence in 1821, they were even less effective at controlling the tribe. Meanwhile, the mobile nature of the Comanche society meant that they weren't just superior fighters, they were also successful traders, transporting goods and, unfortunately, enslaved populations between colonial powers and other native groups. While the exact details are lost to history, probably because history is written by the winners, the Comanche became expert horsemen in the late 17th century, and that's underselling it a bit. What is known is that they first acquired horses through the indigenous horse trade after the 1680 Pueblo Revolt. That's a fun little story. In short, the Spanish tried to settle the area, got demolished, and the Pueblo got horses out of it to boot. Soon after, the Comanche migrated south, probably to get closer to the free-roaming but feral mustangs of the Southwest, descendants of horses left behind by the Spanish. The Comanches captured the tough little horses for riding and maintained large herds on the prairie grasslands. This was a game-changer for the tribe.
Everything you see and everything you saw yesterday is my home!
It's hard to put in perspective today, but the horse is what made the Comanche what they were, a killing machine that wreaked terror everywhere they went. With the Apache gone and French colonists eager to re-up on horses, buffalo hides, and meat, the Comanche were able to trade for European products, including guns. They also traded with northern tribes who also needed horses in exchange for products from British Columbia. To the Comanche, horses, whether caught, bred, or stolen, were gold. The tribe were also willing participants in the teeming trade in enslaved people, initially selling captured Apaches but then expanding into other populations as they raided New Spain and Mexico, some of whom arrived with their own African-descended enslaved people in tow. Morality aside, the Comanche recognized the desire for enslaved workers and were willing and able to meet the demand. The Comanche strategy against the Apache was simple: destroy them. Them means everyone, literally. By night, they raided Apache camps to steal or kill livestock, start fires, and destroy their food supply. By day, Comanche warriors made savage frontal assaults designed to kill as many Apache men as they could and capture women and children they could sell into slavery. But if there was no buyer's market, they just killed them too. By 1750, the remaining Apache had fled the territory. In the meantime, the Comanche acquired a better class of gun through trade with French colonists and fur traders in the Louisiana Territory. And just like they had with horses, the tribe quickly became expert marksmen. These new guns and their newfound skill with them enabled the tribe to plunder Spanish settlements nearly at will and resist all attempts by the government to subjugate them. In a martial society like the Comanche, whose way of life relied in part on their fearsome reputation, bravery was key to becoming a valued and respected member of the tribe. One of the ways for a Comanche warrior to earn prestige was a combat ritual called counting coup, practiced by a number of plains tribes. To count coup, a warrior would get close enough to an enemy to kill, then merely touch or strike them with a hand, bow, or other weapon, leaving them unharmed, except in the all-important pride department. This was extremely dangerous. If you were close enough to kill, you were close enough to be killed. Counting coup and other victories wasn't just for bragging rights. The best and bravest fighting men were most likely to marry well and to rise to positions of leadership in the fluid Comanche hierarchy. While the Comanche were a coherent cultural unit with shared interests, the tribe's most important political divisions were smaller. These bands were groups of extended families, related by blood, marriage, or both, traveled together and functioned as a unit, and these smaller groups could align to form larger alliances. When circumstances dictated or interests were no longer shared, bands would merge, reorganize, or split, another benefit of staying mobile. With the extended family serving as a key subunit of Comanche society, it mattered who you married. Even more so than in European-style cultures, you really were marrying the whole family. The ideal arrangement was polygamous, one man with multiple wives, but monogamy still existed, and there are also records of polyandry, one woman with multiple husbands. Sisters made ideal co-wives, but direct marriage between relatives was wisely forbidden. Not a lot of Habsburg jaws among the Comanches. Marriage typically required the approval of a woman's male relatives, especially her brothers, who would be given gifts of horses and possibly bride service or physical labor from the groom-to-be. Comanche weddings weren't really a thing, however. You just moved in together. Generally, a man would live in a teepee with his senior or favorite wife, while his other wives lived nearby in their own teepees. Divorce was possible, but while a man could simply declare himself divorced, a woman had to put herself under the protection of her brothers or a new husband. Those male protectors could then either fight or pay off the starter husband to dissolve the marriage. Comanche religious practice was a personal, even private matter. They believed in a creator who some sources said was one with the sun, while others described them as a distinct entity. Like many societies in the plains and Rocky Mountains, the Comanche believed in a world full of sources of spiritual power called puha. This power could be gifted to an individual by animals, other aspects of nature, or human beings, alive or dead.
This morning in the sky, I saw a sign. The Thunderbird.
Possums, skunks, wolves, bears, bison, cedar, and peyote were considered to have high amounts of intrinsic power for one reason or another. And possums and cedar accepted, many people today would likely agree. Some Comanche men and women could be possessed by a strong or significant power, becoming what was called a puakatl. This power could be transferred, inherited, or learned, or could be sought in a vision quest, during which a young person would go to a higher altitude, where spirits were believed to dwell, and fast, remain awake, and keep themselves isolated. If the spirits chose to grant puha to the seeker, they would then be able to practice spiritual medicine to help their fellow Comanche, either alone or as part of larger medicine societies. When it came to selecting leaders, Comanche society was democratic. Prominent men would gather to elect leaders of a band or a larger group by consensus. Those leaders were chosen for their particular skills, the respect they commanded, and of course, personal charisma. And they could be replaced if they lost the confidence in the men who'd chosen them. Comanche groups tended to elect both a war chief and a peace chief who oversaw civil matters. The peace chief was generally higher ranking. These sub-chiefs could meet in council to make decisions on matters affecting larger groups or the Comanche as a whole, although given the Comanche zeal for personal freedom, decisions weren't binding on individual Comanche. This libertarian-style freedom to act complicated matters with outside groups, especially European powers who expected everyone to be under some sort of government rule.
The Comanche people are a beautiful, strong, proud people, and they're still a nation. They still have 15,000 members.
The Comanche continue to have a democratic government today. The modern Comanche Nation is run by an elected tribal council which regulates tribal membership, administers federal programs, and fulfills the responsibilities and priorities of the modern Comanche people. During the Comanche heyday, their language, Numa Tequap, was widely spoken across the plains to the extent that it sometimes served as a common language among the regions. Unfortunately, after the Comanche were forced onto reservations, United States efforts to crush native identity led many speakers to switch to English, and children stopped learning the language. Nevertheless, several young Comanche men were among the code talkers of World War II, indigenous men who used their languages unknown to German or Japanese intelligence to transmit sensitive military information.
Machines developed by the military would take 4 hours to translate codes that could be decoded by the Comanche code talkers in 3 minutes.
For a time, it seemed the Comanche language might be forgotten, but the tribe have pushed back and are actively working to preserve it.
It's hard, but I mean, if we don't learn it as a young generation, then it's just going to eventually die out.
The Comanche Nation offers language learning materials and translation services for tribal members, though, heads up, they will not translate your tattoo. Don't ask. After the Civil War ended, the U.S. government had more resources to dedicate to crushing resistance to westward expansion, and the Comanche were in the crosshairs. A concentrated military campaign in 1874-75 forced the Comanche onto a reservation in Oklahoma that they shared with the Kiowa and their former foes, the Apache, which was later broken up and allotted to individual residents, with the rest sold to white settlers between 1901 and 1906. A Kiowa Comanche Apache Intertribal Business Committee was formed in 1936, which served as a consolidated tribal government until the Comanche broke off, wrote their own constitution, and formed their own tribal nation in the late 1960s. Today, the Comanche Nation has nearly 15,000 enrolled tribal members and operates a tribal government from offices near Lawton, Oklahoma. The government provides services and cultural resources to enrolled members, ensuring that the Comanche retain both their sovereignty and their identity as a distinct native nation. The current Comanche flag still calls them the Lords of the Southern Plains.